In October 1971, the US military executed the most dangerous suicide mission of the Cold War. A single American submarine sneaked directly into the Sea of Okhotsk, the most heavily guarded Soviet waters on the planet. They sent divers out into freezing waters, 400 feet below the surface, to walk blindly on the pitch-black ocean floor. Their goal? To wiretap a top-secret Soviet communication cable. If caught, it would instantly spark World War III. At the height of the Cold War, the CIA and the US Navy had a massive problem. The Soviet Union operated a massive nuclear submarine base in Kamchatka, at the very edge of the world.
Agreed. We need to finalize the counterstrike.
The Americans desperately needed to know what the Soviet commanders were planning. But the base was perfectly protected. No spy planes could fly over, and radio signals were heavily encrypted. A Navy captain named James Bradley came up with a theory that sounded completely insane. He guessed that the Soviets were communicating with mainland Russia using an underwater telephone cable. Because they believed the cable was unreachable, they likely wouldn't even encrypt their messages. But to find a single 5-inch thick cable in millions of square miles of dark ocean was exactly like finding a needle in a pitch-black haystack. Bradley used brilliant logic. He remembered seeing warning signs on the Mississippi River. He knew the Soviets must have placed similar signs on their beach to warn civilian ships not to anchor. The mission was approved. The Navy secretly modified a special submarine, the USS Halibut. They attached a massive, fake pressure chamber to its back to fool Soviet spies. They told the world they were building a deep-sea rescue vehicle. It was a complete lie. The real purpose was to house elite deep-sea divers and highly advanced wiretapping equipment. In October 1971, the Halibut set sail, slipping quietly into hostile Soviet territory. The tension was agonizing. Above them, Soviet destroyers were actively patrolling. The submarine ran completely silent. One wrong sound meant instant death. Using the periscope, they scanned the foggy Soviet coastline. And there it was. Through the fog, they spotted a large sign on the desolate beach. Do not anchor. They had found the exact entry point of the cable. The submarine descended into the dark. It sank to the freezing ocean floor, sitting in pitch-black darkness 400 feet down. The divers exited the airlock. The water was freezing, and the pressure was absolute hell. In the icy water, they had to feel their way along the muddy bottom blindly with their hands. Suddenly, a diver's hand brushed against something thick and metallic. The Soviet cable. Cutting into it would cause a short circuit and trigger an instant alarm in Moscow. Instead, they brought down a massive 20-foot-long listening device called the pod. It wrapped around the cable, stealing the electromagnetic signals leaking out without piercing it. The divers locked it in place and retreated back to the ghost submarine. Every month, a US submarine would quietly return to the freezing depths to swap the magnetic tapes.
Bravo 7, position.
When the NSA analysts back in Washington played the first tapes, they couldn't believe their ears. Just as Captain Bradley predicted, the Soviet military communications were completely unencrypted. The US listened to top-ranking Soviet admirals casually discussing nuclear codes and secret strategies. They even listened to lower-ranking sailors gossiping and complaining about their commanders. For nearly a decade, America had a front-row seat to the minds of the Soviet military. It gave the US a massive, unbeatable strategic advantage during the Cold War. The secret of Operation Ivy Bells was guarded tighter than the nuclear codes. Only a handful of people in the entire world even knew it existed. But the greatest threats don't come from the enemy. They come from within. Enter Ronald Pelton, a disgruntled, debt-ridden employee of the National Security Agency. In 1980, drowning in bankruptcy, Pelton walked directly into the Soviet embassy in Washington. He committed the ultimate treason. He sold the secret of Operation Ivy Bells to the KGB. And he sold America's greatest underwater secret for a pathetic $35,000. The Soviets were stunned and enraged. They immediately dispatched a salvage ship. In 1981, US satellites watched in horror as the Soviets pulled the pod from the depths. The incredible decade-long run was over. The invisible ear had been deafened. Pelton was caught by the FBI and sentenced to 3 life terms in federal prison. Today, the actual wiretapping device sits as a trophy in a museum in Moscow. A silent piece of metal that captured the darkest secrets of an empire. Proving that sometimes the walls have ears. Even at the bottom of the frozen ocean.
Velmora. Discover the unbelievable.